My name is Elena Marlowe, 29-year-old. And my parents made me a limited guest at my sister's wedding before I even made it past the welcome table. I was standing under an arch of white roses, holding a wrapped gift in one hand and a thick cream envelope in the other, when my mother took my wrist like she was checking me into a hospital instead of welcoming me to a family celebration. "Elena, don't make this awkward," Diane Marlowe said, fastening a gray wristband around my arm. Across it, in black block letters, were two words, "Limited Guest." For a moment, I thought it had to be a mistake. My sister Sophie's wedding was the kind of event my mother had dreamed about since Sophie was old enough to wear tulle. The country club lawn had been transformed into a garden of white chairs, gold ribbons, champagne car, and a flower wall with Sophie and Ethan's initials glowing in soft lights. Every detail said family, legacy, love, and money. Every detail except the gray band on my wrist. "Limited?" I asked. My mother smiled, the way she smiled when cameras were near. All teeth and no warmth. "It just means you're here as family, but not part of the formal family program." My father appeared beside her in a black tuxedo, looking expensive and impatient. Victor Marlowe had the kind of face people trusted before they learned what his promises cost. "Don't take it personally," he said. "Today is about Sophie, not your feelings." I looked past him toward the seating chart. The Marlowe family table was listed in gold calligraphy near the front. My parents, Sophie, Ethan, Ethan's parents, my cousin Rebecca, even my mother's sister, who had not called Sophie in 3 years, had a seat under family. My name was printed on a smaller card near the back Elena Marlowe table 24. A gray dot sat beside it. "What does limited mean exactly?" I asked. My mother sighed. "Already tired of my existence. No family photos. No bridal suite access. No receiving line. No speech. No +1. And please don't wander into the private vendor areas. The planner is very strict today." "You mean you are?" Her eyes sharpened. "Elena." My father stepped closer, lowering his voice. "We included you because Sophie wanted peace. Do not reward that by making yourself difficult." That was how my family worked. They made a wound, then accused me of bleeding at the wrong time. I glanced down at my wrist. The band was plastic, cheap, and ugly, against the blue dress I had spent 2 weeks convincing myself was good enough. "Does Sophie know about this?" My mother's smile flickered. "Sophie has enough to worry about," which meant yes, or close enough. Before I could answer, Sophie herself crossed the lawn in a cloud of silk and perfume, surrounded by bridesmaids in pale pink. She looked beautiful. She also looked right past my wrist until she realized I had noticed. "Elena," she said softly, coming closer, "please don't start today." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because that was the family prayer, "Please don't start." Not, "Please don't hurt her." Not, "Please don't exclude her." Just please let the person being humiliated carry it quietly so the pretty thing can stay pretty. "I haven't started anything," I said. Sophie touched my arm, then immediately removed her hand from the gray band like it might stain her. "Mom said it would avoid confusion. The photographer has a shot list, and there are security rules because of the guest count." "Security rules," I repeated. My father cut in. "Elena, you know how you get when you feel overlooked. I get quiet." "Exactly," my mother said. And quiet can look resentful in photographs. There it was. I was not being limited because I had done anything. I was being limited because my pain might ruin their pictures. A young attendant at the table avoided my eyes as she handed me a program with a gray sticker on the back. "This will help staff know where to direct you," she whispered, embarrassed for all of us. I took it and looked at the gift table across the lawn. It was already covered with satin cards, silver boxes, envelopes, crystal bowls, and imported flowers. My own gift suddenly felt heavier in my hand. Inside the wrapped box was something small for Sophie and Ethan. Something personal. Inside the envelope was something much larger. Something my parents did not know existed yet. My mother followed my gaze and softened her voice, mistaking my silence for surrender. Just enjoy the ceremony. Elena, sit where you're assigned. Smile when appropriate. And let your sister have one day where everything looks right. I looked at the gray wristband again. Limited guest. Not daughter. Not sister. Not family. A category they had invented because excluding me completely would look cruel. But including me, honestly, would cost them pride. Of course, I said, I wouldn't want anything to look wrong. My father nodded, satisfied, already turning away. Sophie gave me one small guilty smile before disappearing back into her cloud of pink dresses. I stood alone beneath the white roses, holding my gift, my envelope, and the proof that my family could make even love conditional if someone printed the right label. They had not removed me from the wedding. They had only removed every place where love would have been visible. I took my assigned seat at table 24 and learned very quickly that limited meant more than the wristband. It meant I was placed behind a pillar, beside one of my father's former co-workers and a distant cousin who asked twice which side of the family I came from. It meant the photographer passed our table 3 times and never lifted his camera. It meant when the bridal party lined up near the garden path, an assistant gently touched my elbow and said, "Family photos are closed group only." Even though I had not moved, it meant my parents had turned exclusion into logistics, which made it harder for anyone else to call it cruelty. I sat with my hands folded over the cream envelope in my lap and watched Sophie laugh beneath the flower arch. She looked radiant. And for a moment, I let myself remember the little girl who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms. The one who cried when she lost her stuffed rabbit. The one I helped write college essays for, while our mother said, "Elena is good at that sort of thing." That sort of thing meant the invisible work. The fixing. The arranging. The remembering. In our family, Sophie shined and I managed. Sophie performed and I prepared. Sophie received applause. And I made sure the stage lights stayed on. When we were children, my father used to say it like a compliment. "Sophie has presence." He would tell guests, one hand on her shoulder, "Elena has practicality." Adults nodded as if practicality was a lovely consolation prize. By high school, it had become a job description. I drove our grandmother to appointments because Sophie had rehearsals. I proofread Sophie's scholarship essay because she was too overwhelmed. I handled insurance forms when my mother couldn't deal with paperwork. I quietly paid a past due utility bill one winter after my father's investment went bad, and he told me not to mention it because your mother is sensitive about appearances. Useful. Yes. Love it? No. There is a difference. But families like mine depend on you, confusing the two. The ceremony began with violins and a soft breeze carrying the scent of roses across the lawn. Ethan stood at the altar, nervous and sweet. The kind of man who looked at Sophie like she had not been raised to believe the world should rearrange itself around her. When Sophie walked down the aisle, everyone stood. I stood too. My gray wristband caught the sunlight. My mother cried beautifully in the front row. My father placed one hand over his heart. I wondered if either of them remembered I was there. Or if the wristband had worked so well that even they had started seeing me as background. During the vows, Sophie promised partnership, honesty, and family. Her voice trembled on the word family. I looked down, The cream envelope in my lap was sealed with a blue ribbon. Inside was not cash. Not a check tucked into a greeting card. Not the kind of gift my parents could quietly absorb and later call their own. It contained a cashier's check, escrow instructions, and a letter from my financial attorney, Mr. Callahan, specifying that the funds were a wedding gift to Sophie Marlowe and Ethan Cole only, not to Victor or Diane Marlowe, not to any family account, not to any reimbursement pool my parents could rename after themselves. I had prepared it because, 6 weeks earlier, Ethan had accidentally called me while trying to reach Sophie and mentioned the venue balance in passing. He thought it was handled. Sophie thought it was handled. My parents had told everyone it was handled. But I knew my father's voice when he said, "There's been a timing issue." And I knew my mother's voice when she said, "We don't need to trouble Sophie with ugly details." Ugly details were always where my family hid the bill. So I made calls. Quietly, I spoke to the venue under my own name. I confirmed the outstanding balances. I asked for vendor invoices, payment deadlines, cancellation clauses, and the exact hour at which service could be suspended if funds did not clear. Then I prepared the gift no one had asked for because asking me would have meant admitting I was useful in a way they could not publicly mock. The ceremony ended. Everyone applauded. Ethan kissed Sophie, and rose petals filled the air. My mother turned for the photographer, dabbing her eyes. My father shook Ethan's father's hand with the confidence of a man standing on a floor he had not paid for. When guests began moving toward cocktail hour, 72, I stayed seated for one extra moment, watching staff hurry near the side entrance. A woman in a black suit spoke urgently into a headset. A man with a clipboard stood near the catering tent, frowning at his phone. Then I saw the wedding planner, Marisol Grant, cross the lawn toward my father with the careful expression of someone carrying bad news through expensive flowers. My father's smile did not change, but his shoulders did. My mother noticed too. She moved beside him, blocking the view from the guests. Marisol said something low. My father's face tightened. My mother whispered, "Not here." I could not hear every word, but I heard enough. Balance. Deadline. Card declined. Service hold. My gray wristband suddenly felt warmer against my skin. Across the lawn, the gift table gleamed under white satin, covered in envelopes from people who had been welcomed without categories. I looked at my own envelope. Heavy, with the one thing my parents had not limited, my ability to decide what my help was worth. I followed the movement near the catering tent without standing up. Because if there was one skill my family had trained into me, it was learning how to notice a crisis before anyone invited me into it. Marisol Grant, the wedding planner, stood with my parents just behind a curtain of white roses, holding her clipboard against her chest like a shield. My father kept smiling toward the guests every few seconds, but the smile never reached his eyes. My mother's voice came out sharp and low. "We paid the deposit." Marisol nodded once. "Yes, Mrs. Marlowe." But the final balance was due before the ceremony began. The venue extended the deadline because Miss Marlowe assured us the wire was processing. "It is processing," my father said. "Then I need confirmation." Marisol replied, "The catering manager will not open dinner service without it. And the band has not received final clearance either." My mother looked over her shoulder, saw me watching, and her face tightened as if my ears were the real problem. "Elena," she called, too sweetly. "Why don't you enjoy cocktail hour?" I glanced down at the gray wristband. Am I cleared for that? Or is cheese a formal family program? Marisol's eyes dropped to my wrist before she could stop herself. Something flickered across her face, confusion first, then embarrassment. My father stepped between us. This is not your concern. The catering tent looks concerned. His jaw tightened. You are here as a guest. My mother's eyes slid to the word on my wrist. A limited one. Remember? There it was again. Not a mistake. Not an awkward label. But a weapon they were willing to use even while the ground under Sophie's perfect wedding began to crack. I stood slowly, still holding the cream envelope. How much is the balance? My father laughed once. Don't be ridiculous. Marisol hesitated. I'm not authorized to discuss financial details with someone who isn't listed as responsible party. I lifted my wrist. Right. Limited. My mother stepped close enough for her perfume to sting. Elena. Do not turn your sister's wedding into one of your little rescue missions. We know you like feeling needed. But not today. I looked at her for a long second. You're about 30 minutes from needing me very badly. Her face went pale with anger. That arrogance is exactly why we made arrangements. No. I said. You made arrangements because excluding me completely would look cruel. And including me, honestly, would make you uncomfortable. My father's hand closed around my elbow. Not hard enough to hurt. Just hard enough to remind me he still believed pressure was a language. Walk away, he said. I looked down at his hand until he released me. Does Sophie know dinner might not happen? My mother snapped. Sophie does not need this stress. Sophie is the bride. And you are not. My father said. Try to remember that. Behind him. Marisol's headset crackled. She turned away. Listened. Then closed her eyes for 1 second. When she faced my parents again, her professional calm had thinned. The venue manager is coming over. If the payment is not verified before cocktail hour ends, we will have to pause service. Pause service, my mother whispered. Horrified. In front of Ethan's family, that was when I understood the true shape of the disaster. It was not about Sophie being heartbroken. It was not about vendors who needed to be paid. It was not even about guests going hungry. My mother's terror lived in one place, only Ethan's family finding out the Marlowes had staged wealth they could not afford. My father pulled out his phone and began scrolling with the violent calm of a man looking for money that did not exist. There is a banking delay, he said again. But no one believed him. Not even Diane. I turned and looked toward Sophie. She was across the lawn with Ethan, laughing as a bridesmaid adjusted her veil for photos. She had no idea the reception behind her smile was one declined card away from becoming a story people told for years. I thought about leaving. I truly did. I thought about walking to my car, taking my envelope with me, and letting my parents stand under their flowers while the consequences arrived with dinner plates still empty. But then Sophie looked over and saw me. For half a second, her smile softened into something younger. Something from before our parents taught her that being loved meant being chosen over me. She gave a small wave. My anger did not disappear. It simply found a border. Sophie had allowed the wristband. She had allowed the seating chart. She had looked away from my exclusion because it made her day easier. But she had not created my father's lies, my mother's vanity, or the unpaid invoices hiding behind white roses. Not all guilt is equal, and not every rescue is forgiveness. I stepped away from my parents and began walking toward the gift table. My mother hissed, Elena, what are you doing? I did not slow down. Being a guest, I said. Guests bring gifts. The satin-covered table stood near the entrance, glowing under little lanterns, piled with envelopes from people my parents had welcomed without limitation. I placed my cream envelope in the center, not on the edge, not hidden under another card, but directly where the photographer, planner, and venue manager could see it. My father came up behind me, breathing hard. If this is some petty stunt, no. I said, turning to him. A petty stunt is printing limited guest on your daughter's wristband. This is paperwork. Then I tapped the envelope once. And for the first time all day, my father looked afraid of a gift. My father stared at the cream envelope like it had insulted him in public, which was almost funny considering how comfortable he had been doing that to me. What paperwork? He demanded. I turned toward Marisol, who was still standing near the rose curtain with her clipboard pressed to her chest. Would you please open it with the venue manager present? My mother made a sharp sound. Absolutely not. That table is for gifts. Elena. Not your little performance. I looked at the gray band around my wrist. Then consider this a limited performance. The venue manager arrived before my father could answer. A tall man in a charcoal suit with a name badge that read Daniel Reeves. His expression was polite, but his eyes were not. They had the flat patience of someone who had already given rich people 3 chances to stop lying. Mr. Marlowe, he said. We need final confirmation now. My father lifted one hand. Daniel. I told you. The bank. The bank declined 2 cards and returned no wire confirmation. The words were quiet, but not quiet enough. A bridesmaid nearby stopped laughing. Ethan's father turned his head. My mother's face went stiff with horror. Lower your voice, she whispered. Daniel did not. The balance must be cleared before dinner service begins. Marisol looked from him to me. Miss Marlowe, are you saying this envelope contains payment authorization? My father barked. She is not authorized to discuss payment. No, I said, but I am authorized to make one. I picked up the envelope and handed it to Daniel before my mother could snatch it away. There is a cashier's check for the outstanding venue balance. Separate payment instructions for catering. Floral overage. Entertainment clearance. And a letter from my attorney. Mr. Callahan. The funds are a wedding gift to Sophie Marlowe and Ethan Cole only. They are not a reimbursement to Victor or Diane Marlowe. They cannot be redirected into a family account. They cannot be announced as paid by my parents. The air changed. Even before Daniel opened the envelope, the people close enough to hear understood something had shifted. My father was no longer the man handling a minor delay. My mother was no longer the elegant mother of the bride protecting a perfect day. They were 2 people standing beside a gift table while their limited guest explained the rescue terms. Daniel opened the envelope. Marisol stepped closer. My father reached for it, but Daniel angled his body away with professional ease. This is private. My father snapped. No, Daniel said, scanning the first page. This is payable. My mother grabbed my wrist, her fingers closing over the gray band. Elena. What have you done? I looked at her hand until she let go. I brought a gift. This is humiliation. No, I said. Humiliation was making your daughter wear a label so staff would know where she wasn't welcome. Marisol's eyes flicked to the wristband again. And this time, she did not look away politely. Daniel read the attorney letter in silence, then handed it to Marisol. The cashier's check covers the venue balance. The escrow instructions appear to cover the remaining vendors once they submit final invoices. My father's mouth opened, but no sound came out. My mother whispered, Escrow. Yes, I said. So no one can take guest envelopes tonight and pretend they are emergency wedding funds. No one can tell Sophie later that you saved her day. No one can call my help family loyalty while treating me like a controlled access problem. Behind us, Ethan had appeared with Sophie beside him. Her veil was lifted over one shoulder, and the joy on her face was slowly being replaced by confusion. What's going on? She asked. My mother turned quickly. Too quickly. Nothing. Sweetheart. Just a small payment issue. Sophie looked at Daniel. Then Marisol. Then the envelope in his hand. Then my wrist. Why does Elena have that band? No one answered fast enough. I watched her read the words. Limited guest. Her face changed. Not completely. Not enough to erase years. But enough to prove she finally saw it without my parents translating it for her. Mom, Sophie said. My mother's eyes shone with anger disguised as tears. We were trying to keep the day organized. By labeling my sister, Ethan asked quietly. It was the first time he had spoken, and somehow his calm made it worse for them. My father stepped in. This is being blown out of proportion. Elena has always been sensitive about her place in the family. I lifted my wrist between us. You printed my place in the family. Silence spread outward from the gift table. A few guests had gathered now. Drawn by the stillness more than the words. Vanessa was not in this story. But Sophie's maid of honor had stopped halfway across the lawn with 2 champagne flutes in her hand. Ethan's mother stood near the cocktail bar, her eyes sharp. My mother's perfect wedding face had begun to crack around the mouth. Daniel cleared his throat. With this payment, dinner service can continue, Marisol added, softer but clear. Because of Miss Elena Marlowe's gift, my father reacted instantly. Because the family handled it, he said. I turned to him. No, because I handled what the family hid. Then I reached down, peeled the gray wristband off my arm, and placed it on the gift table beside the cashier's check copy. The limited guest just became the only reason the full reception continues. For once, my parents had no correction ready. Sophie stared at the gray wristband lying on the gift table beside the payment documents. And for the first time all day, her wedding face disappeared. Not cracked. Not softened. Disappeared. Under the veil. Under the makeup. Under the perfect bride smile my mother had trained into her since childhood. She looked suddenly young and confused and hurt, in a way that had nothing to do with flowers or photographs. You told me everything was paid, she said. My father straightened immediately, reaching for the confident tone he used when numbers were bad and people were watching. It was a timing issue. I looked at him. No, it was a truth issue. Ethan's hand moved to Sophie's back, but his eyes stayed on my parents. Victor. Is the venue saying dinner would have stopped Daniel Reeves, answered before my father could. Without verified payment. Yes. Service would have been paused before the reception. My mother made a small, furious sound. This is inappropriate. Daniel. We are standing in the middle of my daughter's wedding. I am aware, he said. That is why I asked for payment confirmation before the ceremony. Sophie's mouth parted. Before the ceremony, Marisol's expression was careful, but not cruel. We tried to resolve it quietly. With them, Sophie asked, pointing at our parents. Not with me. My mother reached for her. Sweetheart, we were protecting you. From what Sophie's voice rose. From knowing my wedding wasn't paid for, my father stepped in quickly. Sophie, calm down. This is exactly why we didn't want to involve you. Elena has turned a minor financial delay into a scene. I laughed once. Sharp and humorless. I didn't decline your card. Ethan's mother, who had been standing near the cocktail bar, came closer. She was a tall woman in a pale green dress, elegant in a way that did not beg for attention. Her name was Margaret Cole. And until that moment, she had been polite enough to stay out of Marlowe family business. Victor, she said, were you planning to tell my son and daughter-in-law that their reception was at risk? My father's smile looked painful. Margaret. This is being exaggerated. Daniel lifted the cashier's check copy slightly. It is not. That 2-word sentence did more damage than any speech could have. My mother's eyes flashed toward me. Elena. Come with me. Now. I did not move. No. Not in front of everyone. I lifted my bare wrist where the plastic band had left a faint red mark. You made me limited in front of everyone. Sophie looked at the mark, then at the wristband, then at our mother. Did you approve that Diane's face shifted through 4 different answers before choosing the worst one? We needed structure. You needed a label. I said. Structure would have been a seating chart. You printed a warning. My father snapped. Enough. Elena. You are not the victim here. You came prepared to embarrass us. I came prepared because I know you. Ethan turned to Sophie. Did you know she was seated at table 24? Sophie swallowed. I knew Mom said the family table was complicated. Sophie. I said quietly. Complicated is when people have divorced parents and step-siblings. This was deliberate. Her eyes filled. But I did not soften the truth for her. She had worn the white dress. But that did not make her innocent of everything around it. You saw the band before the ceremony. She flinched. I thought it was just for staff access. And you didn't ask why your sister needed less access than your florist. My mother gasped. Do not guilt her on her wedding day. I turned to her. You used her wedding day to hide your debt and my humiliation. Don't pretend you're protecting her now. For 1 second. Sophie closed her eyes. And I saw it happen. The story my parents had given her began separating from the room in front of her. They had told her I was sensitive. The wristband was on the table. They had told her I made things about myself. The unpaid balance was in Daniel's hand. They had told her they were protecting her. The reception had been 30 minutes from stopping. When she opened her eyes again, she looked at my father first. You lied to me. Victor's face tightened. We handle it. Sophie shook her head. No. Elena handled it. My mother whispered. Sophie. Don't do this. Sophie looked at the gift table. Then at me. Why did you still help? I held her gaze. Because you are not responsible for every lie they told. But you are responsible for what you do now. Ethan squeezed her hand. Margaret Cole stood silently beside him, watching my parents with the expression of a woman revising an entire family opinion in real time. My father tried one more time. This wedding needs dignity. I looked at the gray band on the satin table, then maybe stop asking the only person who brought any to leave the room. Sophie reached down, picked up the wristband, and held it like evidence. For the first time in my life, my sister looked at our parents like they were the problem, instead of asking me to stop reacting to it. Sophie stood at the gift table holding the gray wristband. And nobody moved. The band looked smaller in her hand than it had looked on my wrist. But somehow crueler now that everyone understood what it meant. My mother reached for it. Give that to me. Sophie pulled her hand back. No. Diane blinked, as if the word had come from the wrong daughter. Sophie had never been good at no. She had been raised on yes. Surrounded by it. Dressed in it. Protected by it. Sophie, my father said carefully. This is not the moment to turn against your family. Ethan looked at him. Which family? The one that almost let our reception collapse? Or the one that paid to keep it going? My father's face hardened. Young man. You need to understand. Margaret Cole stepped forward before Ethan could answer. No. Victor. I think we understand enough. That sentence traveled across the lawn faster than the music. Guests who had pretended not to listen stopped pretending. My mother noticed and immediately adjusted her expression into wounded elegance. This is a private matter. I looked around at the flower wall, the cocktail tables, the photographer, the planner, the venue manager, the guests, and the gift table where my wristband sat beside proof of payment. You keep saying private after making every insult visible. Marisol cleared her throat softly. Dinner service can begin in 15 minutes if Miss Marlowe confirms she wants the payment processed. My father snapped his head toward her. If she confirms, Daniel Reeves answered. The payment terms specify authorization by Elena Marlowe or her attorney, not by you. The air tightened. That was the part my parents had not expected. They had spent years taking my help and renaming it Family Duty. This time, and the receipt had my name on it before they could steal the story. My mother stepped closer to me, lowering her voice. Elena, think about Sophie. Do not ruin your sister's wedding because you want credit. I almost admired the speed of it. 5 minutes ago, my gift was a stunt. Now it was something I might ruin by controlling. I am thinking about Sophie, I said. That is why the payment is for her and Ethan, not you. Sophie's eyes lifted to mine. What does that mean? It means the reception continues if the documents stay accurate. Every vendor receipt lists the payer correctly. No one announces that Mom and Dad handled it. No one uses guest envelopes to reimburse a lie. And no one pretends the limited guest was suddenly family once the balance cleared. My father laughed coldly. You want a public thank you? No. I said, I want a public correction. My mother recoiled. Absolutely not. Ethan turned to Sophie. She deserves one. Sophie looked down at the wristband again. Her fingers trembled. I could see the battle on her face, the daughter trained to protect the perfect day against the woman, realizing the day had been built on someone else's erasure. Finally, she handed the wristband to Marisol. Remove her restrictions. My mother gasped. Sophie. Sophie's voice shook. But she did not take the words back. Remove them. Marisol looked at me, asking permission without saying it. I nodded once. She took the wedding program from the check-in attendant nearby, pulled up the digital seating chart on her tablet, and said clearly, Elena Marlowe will no longer be listed as limited access. No, I said. Everyone looked at me. My mother's mouth curved in triumph for half a second. Thinking I had refused the dignity they had offered too late, I turned to Marisol. Do not quietly delete it. Keep a copy. Sophie swallowed. Elena, I am not asking you to punish yourself forever. I said, but I am not letting them erase what happened just because it became inconvenient. Daniel nodded. We can preserve the original guest designation in the event file. My father looked furious. This is absurd. No, Margaret Cole said, her voice calm and sharp. It is a record. Sophie closed her eyes, then opened them and looked toward the small stage where the reception announcements would happen. Before dinner, she said, I'll say something. My mother gripped her bouquet so tightly, one stem snapped. You will do no such thing. For the first time in my life, Sophie did not look to me to absorb our mother's anger. She faced it herself. You made my sister a limited guest at my wedding. Elena made sure I still had one. Silence followed, deep and stunned. Then, Sophie turned to Daniel. Process the payment. Daniel looked at me. I nodded. Process it. My father's face went pale as the venue manager walked away with the documents. My mother stared at Sophie like betrayal wore bridal silk. And I stood beside the gift table. No wristband on my arm. No seat at the family table. No apology yet worth accepting, but for once, the room knew exactly who had been limited, and exactly who had saved them anyway. The 15 minutes before dinner felt longer than the ceremony. Guests drifted toward the reception hall, pretending they had not witnessed the bride holding a gray wristband like evidence, and the venue manager walking away with payment documents from the sister seated at table 24. My parents moved quickly, because control was their oldest habit. My father pulled Sophie toward the side of the flower wall, his voice low and dangerous. You are emotional. You are embarrassed. You are not thinking clearly. Sophie still had one hand tucked into Ethan's. I am thinking clearly for the first time today. My mother stepped in front of her, blocking the photographer's view. Sweetheart, a public correction will make this worse. For who? Sophie asked. Diane's mouth opened, then closed. That silence answered more than she intended. Ethan looked at me from across the gift table, his expression careful. Elena. What exactly do you want? Said my father snapped. She wants worship. I looked at him. No. I want the lie stopped before it becomes family history. Margaret Cole nodded once, as if that was the most reasonable thing anyone had said all afternoon. Marisol returned with her tablet and spoke gently to Sophie. Dinner service is cleared. The band is cleared. Catering is moving now. Sophie let out a breath that should have been relief, but it sounded like grief. Because of Elena, my mother whispered. Because we are a family. No, I said, because I put my name where you put a label. My father turned on me. Do you hear yourself? You are using money to humiliate your parents. I lifted my bare wrist. The red mark from the band was still there. You used access to humiliate your daughter. He looked away first. That small defeat warmed nothing in me, but it steadied my spine. Sophie gathered her skirt in one hand and began walking toward the small stage at the front of the reception hall. My mother followed fast. Sophie, do not ruin your entrance. Sophie stopped. You almost ruined my reception. We were handling it. Elena handled it. Diane's face tightened. After making sure everyone knew, I stepped beside Sophie before my mother could reach her again. Everyone knew I was limited before they knew I helped. Sophie looked down, and I saw shame cross her face. Not performative. Not pretty. Real. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I did not answer right away. An apology spoken in a corner is not the same as a correction owed in public. Sophie seemed to understand, because she nodded and walked on. The reception hall was glowing when we entered. Candles on every table. White flowers hanging from the ceiling. Gold chargers beneath folded napkins no one had touched yet. Guests turned as Sophie crossed the room without music. Without the grand announcement my mother had planned. Without my father's arm guiding her like a trophy. Ethan followed. Then Margaret. Then Marisol. I stayed near the side wall. I had not paid to become the center of her wedding. I had paid so the truth would not be buried under empty plates and borrowed pride. Sophie stepped to the microphone. My mother froze near the head table. My father stood behind her. His face locked in a smile that would never survive close inspection. Sophie gripped the microphone with both hands. Before dinner begins, she said, her voice shaking. I need to correct something. The room quieted quickly. My sister Elena was wrongly treated as less than family today. She was given a limited guest wristband, seated away from the family table, and excluded from parts of this wedding where she should have been included. A ripple moved through the room. My mother closed her eyes. Sophie continued. That was not okay. I allowed it because I wanted the day to be easy. And that was wrong. My throat tightened despite myself. She looked toward me. And the reason this reception is continuing tonight is because of Elena's wedding gift to Ethan and me. Not to my parents. To us. My father's smile vanished. There it was. The line he could not edit. The gift table had done what the family table refused to do. It had named me correctly. Sophie swallowed hard. Thank you, Elena. I'm sorry. It took this for me to say what should have been obvious before today. Guests began clapping. Uncertain at first. Then louder. Not celebration exactly. Recognition. My mother sat down slowly, as if her dress had become too heavy. My father remained standing, exposed by the applause he could not control. Sophie stepped away from the microphone and looked at the empty chair beside her at the family table. There's a seat for you now, she said. I looked at the chair, then at the gray wristband still on the gift table in my mind. A chair after humiliation is not the same as respect before it, I said softly. Then I walked to table 24, pulled out my assigned chair, and sat exactly where they had put me, only now. Everyone knew who had made the room worth staying in. Dinner began because my payment cleared. But nobody at the reception could pretend the room felt the same. Forks touched china more quietly. Conversations restarted in careful pieces. Every few minutes, someone glanced toward table 24, then toward the family table, where my parents sat beneath the soft gold lights, looking like hosts at a party they no longer owned. Sophie's public correction had not made everything healed. It had only made everything visible. That was enough for one night. I ate half my salad, ignored 3 curious stares from distant relatives, and kept my phone face down beside my plate. Marisol came by once and placed a new escort card in front of me. It was cream with gold lettering, matching the family table cards. Elena Marlowe family. I looked at it for a long moment, then slid it gently back toward her. Thank you, I said, but not tonight. She nodded as if she understood more than a planner was paid to understand. Across the room, my mother watched the exchange with tight lips. My father leaned towards Sophie, speaking through his teeth. Sophie shook her head once. Ethan placed his hand over hers on the table. Margaret Cole saw everything and missed nothing. When the band began playing soft dinner music, my father stood abruptly and walked toward me. Conversations thinned as he passed. He stopped beside my chair. Not close enough to look threatening, but close enough to remind me that he still thought he had a right to my space. Elena, he said, smiling for anyone watching. We need to talk. I took a sip of water. No, we don't. His smile tightened. This is your sister's wedding. Don't continue punishing her. I saved her reception. You humiliated your mother and me. I looked at him calmly. You printed the wristband. His eyes flicked to the people at my table. The former coworker suddenly found his bread roll fascinating. My distant cousin stared straight into her wineglass. My father lowered his voice. You have always needed to be the martyr. No, I said. I was assigned the role. Today I declined the script. His jaw flexed. Do you think one payment buys you moral superiority? No. But it did buy dinner. Someone at the table coughed into a napkin. My father's face reddened. You are enjoying this. Not as much as you enjoyed limiting me before you needed my money. That landed. I saw it in his eyes, not remorse, but recognition that I was no longer speaking in the private language where he could interrupt, correct, or rename my pain. He leaned closer. You will regret making enemies of your family. I smiled then. Small and tired. You made me a limited guest. I'm accepting the limit. His expression went still. Before he could answer, Margaret Cole appeared at his side with the graceful timing of a woman who had raised a son not to confuse volume with authority. Victor, she said. Sophie and Ethan are about to cut the cake. Perhaps you should return to your seat. My father looked at her, then at me, then at the tables, pretending not to listen. He had no good move left. If he argued, he looked cruel. If he walked away, he looked dismissed. In the end, he chose the smaller humiliation and returned to the family table. Margaret remained for 1 second longer. For what it is worth, she said quietly. I am sorry we did not ask more questions earlier. I believed her. I also knew belief was not the same as absolution. Thank you, I said. Take care of Sophie. Her eyes softened. We will try. After cake, Sophie came to table 24 without Ethan, without our parents, without bridesmaids forming a protective cloud around her. She stood beside me, twisting her wedding ring slowly around her finger. "Can I sit?" she asked. I looked at the empty chair beside me. "You're the bride." That wasn't my question. I nodded once. She sat. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then she placed the gray wristband on the table between us. I had not seen her take it back from Marisol. "I'm keeping this," she said. "Not as punishment for you. As proof for me." I studied her face. Proof of what that easy is not the same as right. Her voice cracked slightly. "I knew Mom was excluding you. Maybe not all of it. But enough." I told myself it was logistics because that was easier than admitting I let them do it. I did not rescue her from the confession. She deserved to hear herself say it. "And the money I asked?" "I didn't know." She looked toward our parents. But I should have known they were capable of lying if the room looked pretty enough. That was the first honest thing Sophie had said to me in years. Not perfect. Not enough. But honest. "Thank you for helping," she said. "I know I didn't deserve it." I folded my hands on the table. "I didn't do it because you deserved it. I did it because I refused to let them turn your marriage into another debt they hid behind me." She nodded, crying silently now. "Can we fix this?" I looked at the band. Then at the family table, where my mother sat rigidly, and my father refused to look over. "Not tonight," I said, and not by pretending a speech erased the wristband. Sophie wiped her cheek. "Okay. For once." She did not push. She stood, took the wristband, and went back to Ethan. I stayed at table 24 until the dancing began. Watching the wedding continue under lights my parents had not paid for and applause they could not claim. The reception survived. Their story did not. I left the reception before the bouquet toss. Not because I was running. And not because I wanted anyone to chase me. I simply reached the end of what I was willing to give that night. The music had grown louder. The dance floor had filled. And Sophie was standing with Ethan near the cake table, smiling in a way that looked tired but real. My parents had not spoken to me again after my father's failed visit to table 24. My mother watched me from across the room as if I were a stain she could not ask staff to remove. When I stood, a few people noticed. One aunt gave me a small, embarrassed nod. The former coworker at my table whispered, "That was very generous of you." I picked up my purse. It was very documented of me. He did not know whether to laugh. So he looked down at his coffee. At the exit, Marisol met me with a folder and a quiet expression. "Copies of the processed payment confirmations," she said. "Your attorney will receive digital versions tonight." "Thank you." She hesitated. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry about the wristband. I was told it was a family security preference." I looked at her for a second, then nodded. "Now you know whose security it protected." Her face tightened with understanding. "Yes." Outside, the night air felt clean in a way the reception hall never had. I stood under the portico while valet lights moved across polished cars, and for the first time all day, my wrist felt like mine again. The red mark from the band was fading, but not gone. I hoped it lasted until morning. Some evidence belongs on skin before it belongs in files. My phone buzzed as the valet brought my car. A text from Sophie appeared first. "Thank you for not letting them destroy everything." I stared at it. Then another bubble followed. "I know that does not fix what I allowed. I am sorry." I did not answer. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because apologies spoken while the music was still playing needed time to become behavior. The next message came from my mother. "You embarrassed us beyond repair tonight." I almost smiled. Beyond repair was a phrase she had never used for me when I was the one being humiliated. Only reputations broke loudly enough for Diane Marlowe to hear. Then, my father called. I let it ring until it stopped. He called again. I blocked him before the third call could begin. By the time I reached my apartment, Mr. Callahan had already emailed a summary. Venue balance cleared. Catering cleared. Band cleared. Vendor escrow active. All invoices to list Elena Marlowe as payer. Gift restricted to Sophie Marlowe and Ethan Cole. No reimbursement by Victor or Diane Marlowe accepted without written consent. I read the last line twice. No reimbursement. That mattered. My parents loved turning debts into hooks. If they could repay me in some dramatic future, they would call it closure. Then use the repayment as proof that the humiliation had been settled like a bill. I did not want their money. I wanted the record to remain exactly as it was. They failed. I chose. And the gift belonged to the couple, not the liars. Near midnight, Sophie called. I watched her name glow on my screen until it went dark. A voicemail appeared. I did not play it right away. Instead, I removed my dress, washed the makeup from my face, and placed the gray escort card from table 24 on my kitchen counter. Elena Marlowe table, 24. I did not have the wristband. Sophie had kept it. Good. Let her keep one ugly thing from the prettiest day of her life. Let her remember that beautiful rooms can still be built around someone else's exclusion. When I finally played the voicemail, Sophie's voice was small. Elena. It's me. I'm not calling to ask you to forgive me tonight. Ethan and I are going to pay attention now. Really pay attention. I'm sorry I let Mom make you smaller because it made the day easier. And I'm sorry it took money for everyone to see what you've always been doing. She paused. And I heard muffled music behind her. You don't have to call back. I just wanted to say it without them standing there. I saved the voicemail. I did not reply. The next morning, the first family narrative arrived exactly on schedule. My mother sent a group text to several relatives, claiming there had been a minor venue confusion and that I had created tension by insisting on public credit. Unfortunately for her, Marisol's records, Daniel's payment confirmation, Sophie's speech, and half a dozen guests' memories disagreed. Ethan's mother replied to the thread before I could even decide whether to open it. Diane, this is not accurate. Elena prevented a service shutdown and was mistreated before doing so. Please do not rewrite what happened. I read that message 3 times. Then, set the phone down. For years, my parents had counted on everyone accepting their version because correcting them took energy. Now someone else had spent the energy before I had to. That felt strange. Almost like rest. By noon, Mr. Callahan sent one final note. Would you like future communication from Victor and Diane routed through my office? I looked at the fading mark on my wrist and typed back, yes. Limited access. Then I closed my laptop and made coffee in the quiet of my own kitchen, where no one needed a wristband to know I belonged. By Monday morning, my parents had discovered the worst part of a documented gift. They could not return it, rename it, or pretend it had come from them. Mr. Callahan forwarded me the first email at 8:12 a.m. With a subject line so predictable, I almost laughed. Family reimbursement matter. My father had written through his assistant, not even his attorney, offering to reimburse Elena for her unnecessary intervention at Sophie's wedding in order to restore family dignity. Restore family dignity. That was what he called it when his card declined. His lie collapsed, and the daughter wearing a gray wristband paid the balance he had hidden behind white roses. Mr. Callahan's reply was only 3 sentences. The wedding gift was legally restricted to Sophie Marlowe and Ethan Cole. Victor and Diane Marlowe are not parties to the gift. Ms. Marlowe declines reimbursement and direct contact. I read it twice, then saved it into a folder on my laptop named Limited Access. By noon, My mother tried the emotional route. She sent a message through a cousin saying the family was heartbroken by Elena's need to punish everyone. Attached was a photo from the ceremony where Sophie and Ethan were smiling under the arch. Carefully cropped, so, table 24. The gift table. And the gray wristband did not exist. I did not answer. Instead, I forwarded it to Mr. Callahan and added one sentence. Please archive all indirect contact attempts. He replied, already building the file. It was strange how peaceful those words felt. A file did not argue. A file did not cry in a cream dress and ask why I was ruining the day. A file simply remembered. Sophie emailed me that afternoon. Not a text. Not a voicemail from the dance floor. A real email. With a subject line that said, what I allowed. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Elena. I am not writing to ask for forgiveness. I am writing because I need to say clearly that I knew enough to stop it, and I didn't. I knew you were not at the family table. I knew Mom had created access rules. I saw the wristband before the ceremony and told myself it was logistics because logistics felt less ugly than admitting I was letting my sister be marked as less than family. You saved my wedding. But that does not erase what I allowed before you saved it. Ethan and I are reviewing every invoice, so Mom and Dad cannot touch your gift or rewrite it. I am keeping the wristband. Not to punish you, but to remind myself that comfort is not innocence. I read the email once. Then again. My chest hurt. But not in the old way. Sophie had finally written something that did not ask me to make her feel better. That mattered. It did not fix anything. But it mattered. I saved the email and did not reply yet. Behavior first. Words later. By Wednesday. Diane's group text version of events had fallen apart. Margaret Cole had corrected her. Marisol's records supported the correction. Daniel Reeves had confirmed the payment timeline. Someone from Ethan's family had quietly mentioned the limited guest wristband to someone from my mother's charity circle. And by the weekend, my parents were no longer telling people I had created drama. They were telling people they did not want to discuss private family pain. Private. They loved that word after public damage. My father made one final attempt that week. He called Mr. Pratton, Callahan's office, and demanded a meeting with me. Sophie. Ethan. And both families to reset the narrative before permanent harm was done. Mr. Callahan asked if I wished to attend. No. I said. What should I tell them? I looked at the fading mark on my wrist. It was almost gone now. Only a pale shadow where the plastic had been Dackler's. Tell them they already set the access level. Mr. Callahan paused. Then I heard the smile in his voice. Limited exactly. The formal notice went out that afternoon. All future communication from Victor and Diane Marlowe regarding the wedding gift, family reimbursement, public statements, or personal reconciliation had to go through counsel. They were not to contact me at home, at work, through relatives, or through Sophie. The wording was professional, but I knew what it meant. They had made me a limited guest at Sophie's wedding. I had made them limited guests in my life. That evening, Sophie sent one more email. Short this time, Mom asked me to tell you she's devastated. I told her I won't be used as a hallway to you. I will respect the notice. I sat with that one longer than the first. Then I typed back only 4 words. Thank you for respecting it. It was not forgiveness. It was not a reunion. It was not a chair at the family table dragged over after everyone had watched me stand alone. It was a receipt for one correct action. A beginning. Maybe. But not the kind my parents could photograph. I closed my laptop and opened the limited access folder one last time before bed. Reimbursement attempt. Indirect message. False family narrative. Sophie accountability email. Formal notice sent. I added a final note at the bottom. They called me limited when they thought I had nothing to give. Now the limit is mine. The first real consequence arrived 2 weeks later. Not from my parents, but from Sophie. She and Ethan sent a formal letter through Mr. Callahan. Copy it to Marisol, Daniel Reeves, and both sets of parents. The subject line was simple: wedding gift acknowledgement and boundary statement. I opened it at my kitchen table before work. Coffee cooling beside my laptop. Sophie wrote that the reception had continued because of my restricted gift, that all vendor receipts would remain under my name, and that neither Victor nor Diane Marlowe had permission to claim, imply, or suggest they had resolved the payment failure. Ethan added a paragraph of his own. Elena's gift protected our wedding from a financial situation we were not informed of. We are grateful, and we will not participate in any family narrative that minimizes how she was treated. I stared at that sentence for a long time, not because it healed everything. It did not, but because for once, someone had put their name beside the truth before I had to beg for it. Mr. Callahan called an hour later. Your father responded. Already, within 12 minutes. Of course he did. Mr. Callahan cleared his throat. He says Sophie is being manipulated by you and Ethan's mother. I almost smiled. My father's world had two kinds of women he controlled and women being controlled by someone else. The idea that Sophie had chosen a thought without permission apparently offended him more than the unpaid invoices. Anything from my mother, I asked. A separate email. She says you are turning Sophie against her parents. I looked at the folder on my screen. Limited access had grown quickly. Reimbursement attempt. Indirect cousin message. False group text. Formal notice. Now, parental accusations. Archive both. Already done. That weekend, Sophie and Ethan hosted a small brunch for people who had helped with the wedding. I did not attend. Sophie invited me. Carefully. With no pressure and one line that made me pause. We understand if the answer is no. I replied through email. Not counsel this time. Thank you. Not yet. She answered understood. That was new. My parents would have called that cold. I called it respect, arriving late and learning to knock. At the brunch, according to Margaret, Sophie thanked Marisol and Daniel publicly. Then thanked me, even though I was not there. She did not make a speech about family healing. She did not ask people to move on. She said, "My sister gave us a gift with conditions because conditions were the only way to keep it honest. I'm grateful she knew us well enough to protect herself." Margaret forwarded the recording only after asking if I wanted it. I did. I watched it once. Sophie's voice shook. But she did not look away. Behind her, my mother sat rigidly with a napkin folded in her lap. Smiling, the kind of smile that makes the mouth a prison. My father was not there. He had claimed a scheduling conflict. Men like Victor Marlowe love absence when presence no longer flatters them. The social consequences spread quietly after that. My mother's charity circle stopped inviting her to planning lunches where transparency was the theme. My father's former coworker, the one from table 24, saw Mr. Callahan a note confirming he had heard my father demand reimbursement to restore family dignity. Marisol updated her internal vendor file, marking Victor and Diane as restricted financial contacts for any future event connected to Sophie or Ethan. Daniel Reeves sent a final receipt packet with one handwritten line at the bottom. "We are glad the correct payer is documented." Correct payer. 2 words my parents could not buy. Borrow. Or edit. Then came the invitation I had expected and dreaded. Sophie asked to meet me for coffee. Not at our parents' house. Not at her apartment with Ethan, waiting like a referee. A public cafe halfway between us. She wrote, "I want to apologize without asking you to comfort me. You can leave whenever you want." I almost said no. Then I thought of the wristband in her hand. The public correction. The boundary letter. The brunch recording. The way she had refused to become a hallway for my mother. Behavior first. Words later. Maybe this was behavior. I agreed to 30 minutes. When Sophie arrived, she wore no bridal glow, no family diamonds, no practiced, Marlowe smile. She placed the gray wristband on the table between us. Sealed in a clear plastic sleeve like evidence. "I'm not giving it back," she said. "I know. I keep it in my desk." Why her eyes filled. But she did not cry. Because I need to remember that I can love how a room looks and still be responsible for who it hurts. That was the closest thing to maturity I had ever heard from my sister. I looked at the band. Then at hair. "I'm not ready to be close." She nodded. "I know. I may never be close the way you want. I know that too." For the first time, she was not asking me to return to the family table. She was sitting across from me at a small cafe table, accepting that the seat beside me had to be earned one honest choice at a time. When our 30 minutes ended, she did not ask for a hug. She only said, "Thank you for coming." I stood. "Thank you for not making me regret it." Outside, my phone buzzed with a blocked number. I deleted the voicemail without listening. Then I walked to my car, lighter than before. Not because the family was fixed, but because the limit was holding. 6 months after Sophie's wedding, the last invoice connected to the reception was closed, signed, scanned, and filed under my name. Mr. Callahan sent me the final packet on a Thursday afternoon with a note that said, "All vendors paid. No reimbursement accepted. No disputed claims remaining." I sat at my desk and read those 3 sentences twice, feeling a quiet kind of satisfaction settle over me. Not joy. Exactly. Joy is too bright for something built from old hurt. This was steadier, the kind of peace that arrives when a door finally locks from your side. My parents tried one more time to reopen it. My father sent a letter through his attorney claiming he wanted a family reconciliation meeting so we could move beyond the unfortunate misunderstanding at Sophie's wedding. Mr. Callahan forwarded it with no comment. Because by then, even he knew the pattern. I read the phrase, "unfortunate misunderstanding," and thought of the gray wristband. Table 24. My mother's warning not to make things awkward. My father's voice saying, I was here as a guest. A limited one. There had been no misunderstanding. They had understood exactly what they were doing until the gift table understood them back. Decline. I wrote. No meeting. My mother tried through Sophie next. But Sophie did not pass along the message. She sent me only one email. "Mom asked me to ask you something." I told her I would not be used that way. "I hope that is still the right choice." I replied. "Yes. Thank you." That was still where we were small, honest exchanges. No forced closeness. No family table pretending history had been reset. Sophie and I met for coffee once a month. After that, sometimes we talked about books, work, Ethan, ordinary things. Sometimes she told me how hard it was to see our parents clearly without running back to the old comfort of believing me difficult. I did not comfort her for that. I listened. When I had the energy. When I did not, I said so. And for once, she accepted the limit. On the 6-month anniversary of the wedding, Sophie brought the gray wristband to coffee again. She placed it on the table in its plastic sleeve, next to 2 cups of black coffee and 1 untouched sugar packet. Ethan and I made a decision. She said, I waited. We're not accepting money from Mom and Dad anymore. Not for a house. Not for holidays. Not for future children. Nothing. I looked at her carefully. That's a big decision. It should have been obvious sooner. Most obvious things are expensive when you finally admit them. She gave a small, sad smile. You sound like yourself again. I was always myself. You just weren't listening. She nodded. No defense. No tears arranged to make me soften. Just a nod. That mattered more than any dramatic apology. Later that week, Margaret Cole sent me a photo from Sophie and Ethan's new apartment. On their entryway table sat a framed card from the wedding gift table. Not a picture of my parents. Not the family portrait my mother had tried to force into existence. Just a small cream card that read, "A gift to Sophie and Ethan. With love and clear records. From Elena." Beneath Margaret's message was one line, "They remember who kept the lights on." I saved the photo. I did not send it to my parents. I did not need them to know every place I was finally being named correctly. Their punishment was not one big explosion anymore. It was smaller and colder. Birthdays, where Sophie no longer asked them for help. Holidays, where Ethan's family set the tone. Charity lunches, where Diane was no longer trusted with budgets. Business contacts who remembered the phrase "limited guest" before they remembered Victor's handshake. They had wanted me reduced to a gray band at the edge of a wedding. Instead, that band became the record that followed them out of the room. On the last page of the limited access folder, I wrote a summary for myself: wedding saved, payment documented, parents restricted, sister accountable. Slowly. No reimbursement. No private rewrite. No forced reconciliation. Then I closed the folder. My parents made me a limited guest because they thought belonging was something they could assign with a wristband, a table number, and a rule sheet. They forgot that limits can be returned. They limited my seat, my photos, my access, my place in the family. So I limited their access to my money, my time, my forgiveness, and my life. And if they ever wondered why the daughter at table 24 never came back to the family table, all they had to do was look at the gift table, the only place at that wedding where my name had been allowed to mean something. A plastic wristband can look harmless when it is lying on a table. Cheap. Thin. Disposable, the kind of thing people throw away after a concert, a hospital visit, or an event they barely remember. But on someone's skin, it becomes a message. It tells the staff where to stop you, the cameras where to ignore you, and the family how little they are willing to claim you when being seen beside you costs them pride. The market leaves may fade by morning, but the lesson should not. Exclusion becomes easier when people turn it into procedure. That is why records matter. They force everyone to admit who made the rule, who followed it, and who benefited from pretending it was normal. I did not keep the payment documented because I wanted applause. I kept it documented because truth without a receipt is too easy for dishonest people to rename. My gift saved the reception, but the conditions saved me. They made sure kindness did not become a leash. Money did not become a lie. And family did not become another word for unlimited access. From that day on, I understood that a boundary is not the opposite of love. Sometimes it is the only way love can remain honest. Scriptwriter Nguyen Van Chien.